Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Zero Hour. You know, on this program, we don't usually focus on the Republican freak show because there are people who do that full time, but there is always room for Huckabee. We are, of course, speaking about Mike Huckabee, the Arkansas governor, former preacher, former presidential candidate, perhaps future presidential candidate, former Fox News host, who made a little bit of news this week by disrespecting the women folk. This is what Mike Huckabee had to say. He said, in the South, in Iowa, you would not have people who would just throw the F-bomb and use gratuitous profanity in a professional setting. This is what Huckabee said. He said, in New York, you know where the fancy folk are, in New York, not only do the men do it, but the women do it too. This is worse than the locker room talk, said Mike Huckabee. This would be considered totally inappropriate to say these things in front of a woman, but for a woman to say them in a professional setting, that's just trashy. That's right. Mike Huckabee called the women of Fox News trashy. At least he didn't use the phrase cuss words, which I was waiting for him to do. Now, Mike Huckabee's other complaints about the female employees of Fox News, that they chew gum, wear nylons, paint their faces like harlots, go to picture shows with fellers, and use modern expressions like 73 skidoo. Or is that 23 skidoo? No, he didn't really make those additional complaints about Fox's women. I'm making that up. The problem is, in talking about it, I'm making the huckster man sound almost likable. Trust me, he's not. He's a smarmy phony. He's the kind of preacher I used to run into with my Southern Baptist cousins when I'd go with them to church back in the day, the kind who used to say, you know who was a really hip cat? Jesus. Mike Huckabee's the kind of preacher who'd invite your rock and roll group to rehearse in the basement, because I understand you kids, then hit on the girls in the group. Now, I'm not saying that Mike Huckabee would do that, but let's put it this way. Don't put a check in the collection plate when he's the preacher, because he might put an extra zero on the end of it. For her part, Megyn Kelly, the Fox News anchor, responded by telling Huckabee that the women of Fox News don't just swear, we quote, we smoke, we drink, and we have premarital sex before we come into work. It's that last line that really interests me. Before we come into work. And I guess my reaction to that was, well, yeah, because anybody with even a vestigial conscience would be unable to work at a place like Fox News unless they anesthetized and annihilated that conscience with alcohol, drugs, and sex before they came into work. But, you know, it's like John Lennon said 45 years ago, keep you doped with religion and sex and TV, and you think you're so clever and classless and free, but you're still blank peasants as far as I can see. Too bad we didn't have John Lennon to speak up when the new right came to power, when Ronnie Reagan came along, or when so many Democrats turned corporate, or when people started turning their backs on their noblest dreams and aspirations. I'd have liked to see John Lennon at an Occupy rally, and I'd have liked to see John debate anyone at Fox News. But he died. It'll be 35 years ago this year. Johnny, we hardly knew ya. And look who we're left with instead. Mike Huckabee and Megyn Kelly. Man, talk about trashy. I'm Richard, RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour.